She poured coffee, cleared empty cups, never spoke. To them, she was just staff. But when the satellite feed finally loaded, a new heat map flashed on the screen, and one colonel dropped his pen. It matched her sketch, line for line exactly. And in that moment, the entire room realized they hadn't been ignoring a waitress. They'd been ignoring the one person who already saw it coming. If you believe some minds operate quietly, type she already knew. The Situation Room at Forward Command Base was strictly restricted to military personnel with top-secret clearance. But somehow no one ever questioned her presence there. She moved silently between decorated generals, methodically refilled coffee mugs, cleared away empty food trays. Always quiet, perpetually invisible to their conscious awareness. They never bothered asking her actual name. She never volunteered personal information on official paper. She was simply listed as Civilian Contractor Administrative Support Services, but no one cared enough to read the personnel file carefully. The current war effort was steadily losing strategic momentum satellite mapping systems, proving unreliable field informants, going dark across multiple sectors. One frustrated general snapped during a particularly tense briefing. How do we have all this expensive technology and still no tactical clarity? She paused in her coffee service, listening carefully, but didn't speak or offer suggestions. That night, after everyone had departed for their quarters, she quietly borrowed a dry erase marker and sketched something barely visible on the edge of the main tactical board. Just subtle pattern arcs, movement trajectory lines, wind corridor indicators. She carefully erased the markings before anyone could discover them. The next day, new intelligence reports arrived from field operatives, but remained frustratingly incomplete. Still no reliable visual confirmation. The chief analyst reported with obvious frustration. We can't accurately predict enemy movement patterns. She poured fresh coffee for him as well. Then turned slightly, glanced at the blank projection wall, and murmured almost inaudibly, "Try layering the data based on thermal flow patterns instead of static positioning." He didn't hear her quiet suggestion. No one in the room did. Later that afternoon, she sat alone in the staff break room, casually doodling in a small personal notebook while eating lunch. The patterns appeared completely abstract, unless someone had extensive experience viewing terrain from high-altitude reconnaissance. Her sketches revealed sophisticated understanding of geographical features, weather patterns, and tactical movement corridors. But no one was paying attention to a civilian contractor's personal doodling. The military officers were focused on official reports, computer analysis, and satellite data. They missed the fact that someone in their midst was processing the same information more accurately than their expensive equipment. Her observations came from careful listening during briefings, combined with pattern recognition skills that exceeded their technological capabilities. She understood that enemy movements followed predictable patterns based on terrain advantages, weather conditions, and supply line requirements. While the officers debated complex strategic theories, she was quietly mapping actual tactical realities. Her civilian status made her invisible to military hierarchy, allowing her to observe without interference. She could hear conversations, study maps, and analyze intelligence without anyone considering her a security risk. The oversight was remarkable. A civilian contractor with apparent strategic intelligence capabilities, working directly inside their most secure facility. But her administrative designation created a perfect camouflage that no one questioned. She continued her quiet routine, serving coffee and observing military planning sessions. Each day provided additional information that she processed through mental models far more sophisticated than anyone suspected. Her notebook filled with increasingly detailed predictions about enemy movements, supply routes, and tactical vulnerabilities. But she kept these insights private, understanding that unsolicited advice from civilian staff would be dismissed immediately. Instead, she waited patiently for the right moment to demonstrate her capabilities. The moment when her analysis would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. She knew that moment was approaching because her predictions were becoming increasingly precise, and the military's confusion was becoming increasingly obvious. Soon they would need answers that their official systems couldn't provide. And she would be ready to provide them through demonstration rather than explanation, through results rather than credentials, through quiet competence that would transform their understanding of her role. 48 hours later, a reconnaissance drone finally penetrated enemy territory successfully. A new comprehensive thermal mapping display came online, revealing complex and fractured enemy positioning patterns. The assembled room stared at the data in concentrated silence. One experienced colonel suddenly froze in recognition. "Wait, this geographical structure looks strangely familiar." He walked purposefully to the back corner where her personal sketchbook had been accidentally left open during the lunch break. His face went completely pale with realization. This is identical tactical structure. She predicted this exact formation line for line correspondence. Someone asked with growing confusion, "Whose sketchbook is that supposed to be?" "The civilian contractor," the colonel whispered with obvious amazement. "The woman who serves coffee." She entered the situation room just then, carrying another tray of refreshments as part of her normal routine. The commanding general looked up sharply from the display. "You drew these tactical predictions?" She paused carefully. "Yes, sir." "How did you know enemy positioning with such accuracy?" "I didn't know their positions," she said softly but clearly. "I noticed patterns. Your mapping systems consistently miss wind drift calculations." "They always have." The chief intelligence officer frowned with obvious skepticism. That level of atmospheric analysis would require top-level security clearance on classified air data modeling systems. "Or observant eyes," she replied simply. A full room of experienced military officers sat in stunned silence. The commanding general stood slowly with obvious respect. "Ma'am, please sit down immediately. You're no longer serving refreshments." She accepted the invitation and took an empty chair at the main tactical table. And then, with calm confidence, she pointed directly to the northwest quadrant of the satellite feed. "They'll initiate their next push from this position, not because it's tactically open, but because you've assessed it as tactically closed." Complete silence followed her prediction, and then one by one, the assembled officers turned their chairs to face her directly. Her analysis had just revealed a fundamental flaw in their strategic thinking. They had been focusing on obvious attack routes while ignoring the psychological warfare element. Enemy commanders were specifically choosing approaches that appeared disadvantageous because those were the routes their opponents would dismiss. "How long have you been making these observations?" the general asked. "Since I arrived," she answered. "Approximately 6 weeks." "Why didn't you share your analysis earlier?" "Because you weren't asking civilian contractors for strategic input," she replied matter-of-factly. The truth was uncomfortable, but undeniable. They had been so focused on official channels and military hierarchy that they had completely overlooked valuable intelligence from someone outside their command structure. Her civilian status had made her invisible to their decision-making process. But that same invisibility had given her a unique perspective on their tactical blind spots. "What else have you noticed?" the intelligence officer asked with newfound respect. She opened her notebook to reveal pages of detailed analysis. Supply route predictions, weather pattern correlations, psychological profile assessments of enemy leadership, all based on careful observation of briefing discussions and satellite imagery. "You've been conducting independent intelligence analysis," the general observed. "I've been paying attention," she corrected. The distinction was important. She hadn't been conducting official analysis. She had been processing information more effectively than their official systems. "What's your background?" someone asked. "Classified," she answered simply, but her analysis spoke for itself. Whether her expertise came from formal training or natural ability didn't matter. What mattered was that she had been to providing more accurate predictions, and then their entire intelligence apparatus. The room's dynamic had shifted completely. She was no longer invisible support staff. She had become their most valuable strategic asset. The next 48 hours transformed the entire command structure in ways that no one had anticipated. She was quietly assigned a temporary computer terminal positioned at a modest side desk with no official nameplate or rank designation. But decorated generals began passing their preliminary intelligence reports to her for review before making strategic decisions. One confident captain attempted to override her tactical assessment with his own analysis. She simply handed him a corrected prediction complete with timing estimates hours before his reconnaissance team confirmed her accuracy through direct observation. "This isn't lucky guessing," someone muttered with obvious respect. "This is advanced field logic that goes beyond textbook military theory." The commanding general pulled up her personnel file through secure military databases. The document was completely redacted. Every section blacked out. An immediate call was placed to a classified operations office. The authoritative voice on the encrypted line simply said, "If she's sketching tactical predictions again, you're already behind enemy movements." No one questioned her credentials after that sobering conversation. Her personal notebook was no longer treated as casual scrap paper. It was professionally scanned and archived as official intelligence documentation. The chief analyst she had once served coffee to now stood respectfully at her shoulder, requesting clarification before conducting strategic briefings. She never asked for an official military title, never requested formal rank recognition. But in every critical decision meeting, the commanding officer waited until she nodded approval before implementing tactical plans. One by one, the military personnel stopped seeing her as invisible background support. She never had to step out of the situation room again during classified discussions, because now the entire room's strategic planning around her analytical insights. Her predictions consistently proved more accurate than official intelligence reports. Her understanding of enemy psychology exceeded their psychological warfare specialists. Her ability to interpret satellite imagery surpassed their technical analysis teams. The transformation was remarkable. A civilian contractor had become the unofficial strategic center of their military operation. But she maintained the same quiet demeanor, never seeking attention or recognition. She simply provided accurate analysis when requested and remained silent otherwise. Her approach demonstrated that true expertise didn't require dramatic presentation or political maneuvering. Competence spoke for itself through consistent results. Military officers who had initially dismissed her as a relevant support staff now sought her opinion on complex tactical decisions. Her civilian status, which had once made her invisible, now provided unique perspective that complemented their military training. She could analyze situations without the constraints of official doctrine or hierarchical thinking. This freedom allowed her to identify patterns and possibilities that traditional military analysis might miss. Her notebook became an unofficial strategic planning document. Officers would reference her sketches during briefing preparations. Her pattern analysis informed their tactical positioning decisions. Her enemy psychology assessments guided their strategic timing. The commanding general began including her in classified video conferences with higher command authorities, not as official military personnel, but as essential strategic consultant. Her insights were reshaping their entire approach to enemy engagement. Traditional military hierarchy remained intact, but practical decision-making now flowed through her analytical capabilities. She had achieved something remarkable in military culture authority based purely on competence rather than rank. Her influence extended beyond individual tactical decisions to fundamental strategic thinking. Officers began questioning their own assumptions, adopting more flexible analytical approaches. The rigid military mindset that had created tactical blind spots was being replaced by adaptive strategic thinking. Her civilian perspective had introduced intellectual diversity that strengthened their overall military effectiveness. The lesson was profound. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources, and sometimes the most important person in the room is the one nobody initially notices. Weeks later, her strategic predictions enabled a flawless extraction operation with 0 military casualties, the first successful mission of its kind in over 2 months. Military officers throughout the command structure began referring to her privately as the Map Whisperer, but never used the nickname to her face out of professional respect. When new commanding officers rotated into the forward base, the outgoing general left them a handwritten note in the secure briefing folder. She doesn't outrank you in the military hierarchy, but you answer to her analytical judgment. Her original tactical sketches now hung prominently in the main war room, professionally framed and mounted. Not displayed for artistic appreciation, but preserved for ongoing strategic reference. And the coffee service cart she had once used, it remained untouched in the corner of the Situation Room, permanently parked, because no one dared suggest she returned to refreshment duties again. Her transformation from invisible civilian contractor to essential strategic consultant had become legendary throughout the military base. New personnel were briefed about respecting her analytical authority regardless of her civilian status. Listen to her insights became standard orientation guidance. Her predictions saved lives. Military doctrine was quietly updated to include procedures for incorporating civilian analytical expertise into strategic planning. Her success story influenced policy changes throughout the broader military command structure. Other forward bases began actively recruiting civilian contractors with analytical backgrounds. The rigid separation between military personnel and civilian support staff became more flexible. Her influence extended far beyond her individual contributions to strategic thinking throughout the military establishment. Academic military institutions began studying her case as an example of non-traditional intelligence analysis, but she remained focused on immediate tactical challenges rather than broader institutional recognition. Her notebook continued filling with detailed observations about enemy patterns, environmental factors, and strategic vulnerabilities. Each page represented potential life-saving insights for military personnel in dangerous situations. She had found her purpose using analytical capabilities to protect people who served their country. The work provided meaning that transcended official recognition or career advancement. Her civilian status remained unchanged, but her strategic influence continued expanding. Higher command authorities began requesting her analysis for operations beyond their local area. Her reputation spread through classified military networks as someone whose insights consistently exceeded official intelligence capabilities. But fame didn't change her fundamental approach to the work. She continued operating quietly, observing carefully, and providing accurate analysis when requested. The same qualities that had made her invisible initially now made her invaluable. Her story became an unofficial legend within strategic planning communities. Not publicized for security reasons, but shared privately among military analysts as inspiration for alternative thinking approaches. Years later, military intelligence training programs would incorporate lessons learned from her analytical methods. Students would study the importance of considering diverse perspectives and questioning official assumptions. Her legacy lived not in public recognition, but in improved strategic thinking throughout the military establishment. The coffee cart remained in the corner of every Situation Room. She worked in a quiet reminder that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources, and that sometimes the most important person in any room is the one who was overlooked initially. Her story proved that true expertise doesn't require credentials or formal recognition. It only requires the ability to see patterns others miss and the courage to share those insights when they matter most. If you believe recognition doesn't come from noise but from clarity, subscribe to The Ordinary Heroes.